Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's kick things off with a story about a Karen on a mission. She delivered HOA fines with disgust for 2 years before realizing she had the wrong address. The twist? The projected house doesn't exist. Don't miss this ridiculousness and painful revelation story. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Karen's 2-year battle against the imaginary 22A. There were a variety of insignificant offenses for which Karen would come to my home and bring fines from the homeowners association. She didn't even bother to greet me. Instead, she simply threw the letter into my mailbox, slammed the lid hard, gave me a look that said she disapproved, and then went. About 2 years passed during this time period. Fines were usually $100 and were issued for a variety of insignificant offenses. Although I did read the letters, I did not take any action on them. Every time Karen stopped by, I made sure to greet her with a hi. Once or twice a month, she'd make her appearance. Sometimes I wasn't at home, but the majority of the time I was. I work from home on my laptop, and some of my favorite places to sit are in my gazebo where I can keep an eye on who's approaching. One day, Karen reached a point where she could no longer take it and moved closer to me. A furious expression appeared on her face as she inquired, "Why do you never pay the fines that our HOA has imposed on you? We're going to file a lawsuit against you and steal your home." I replied in a composed manner, "I am not a member of your HOA." Karen, who'd been frozen for a brief period of time, then questioned with a perplexed expression, "Wait, which is it, 22A?" In response, I stated, "No, this is 22. Karen, who was clearly humiliated, uttered the following, "Oh, I'm sorry." It was after that I did not see her again. The fact that 22A does not even exist is the most hilarious aspect. On the block, my house is the very last one standing. It's highly likely that she was heading in the incorrect direction the entire time. This story's comedy gold. 2 years of fines for a house that doesn't even exist? Karen was truly dedicated to her misguided mission. I can't imagine the audacity it took for her to storm up and threaten to steal your home, only to find out she'd been harassing the wrong person all along. The cherry on top's the fact that 22A isn't even real. The level of pettiness and determination it must have taken to keep delivering those fines is just wild. I hope you savored that moment when her smugness turned into pure embarrassment. It's the kind of justice that's both sweet and hilarious. And our second story. The lady used the wrong credit card, and it's my fault. I work the early shift driving a forklift for a big box retailer. I also assist the front end once we open by cashiering whenever it's needed, which has been every day for the last few weeks with this second wave of panic-stricken doomsday shoppers. Yesterday, my second-to-last customer approaches my line and informs me that she has 2 orders. I want this rang up separate from this. She rudely informed me while making wild hand gestures in the direction of her items on the conveyor belt. "Sure thing," I reply, ignoring her abruptness. Customers request separate orders all the time, so this isn't an issue at all. I ring up her first batch of items and tell her the total. She pays, and I begin on the second order. Upon finishing scanning her items, I inform her of her second total, and it's at this point that she stares at me with the same look Marty McFly made when his Nikes laced themselves. "You want me to pay again?" she asked. "Well, yeah," I answer. "You paid for your first order. This is your second transaction." "So I have to pay again," she repeated, clearly not understanding what was happening. "Ma'am," I addressed her as politely as I could, "you have 2 orders. You've paid for the first one. Now I need you to pay for the second." "Won't that double charge me?" she asked incredulously. No, I replied. "It's not a double charge. You're not being charged the same amount twice. You're being charged for your second order." The blankness in her stare stripped away what little remaining energy I had left after a long, strenuous, stressful week. I took a deep breath and attempted to explain the situation once more as simply as possible. "Ma'am, you have 2 orders. You swiped your card and paid for the first. It's time now to pay for the second order. The first order's done, now it's time to pay for the second." The lady momentarily forgot where she was, then after a few seconds snapped back to reality and swiped her card. Her receipt popped up and I hand her both receipts and wish her a good day. And then her effing brain exploded. Wait, that's not what I wanted, she exclaimed. I wanted to pay for this with this card, not this card, she said while waving 2 separate credit cards at me like I had any control over it. My heart sunk into my chest. I was almost done. The supervisor had already placed the close sign on my lane. I was almost off. I was so close, yet so far away, because this lady clearly wasn't done with me. I'm sorry, I said as genuinely as I could possibly muster. All you said was that you wanted things rang up separately. You said nothing about separate cards. Also, you have the cards in your hand. I'm not the one swiping your cards, I'm sorry. Well, can you undo it, she said. I mean, I don't know. I have to call the supervisor over, ma'am. They may be able to refund one order and recharge you. What? She shouted while pulling down her mask would help her hear me. At that point, I felt like I was having a brain aneurysm. I collapsed my head and pinched my nose in the standard I can't believe this crap pose. Needless to say, this set her off into a tirade. What is wrong with you? She shouted. I'll get a supervisor and maybe they can fix it, I say, while both screaming internally and handing her the receipts. That's a little bullcrap, she said. You know that? That's a little bullcrap. A supervisor finally arrived, and while attempting to explain the issue, the lady cut me off and began ranting to the supervisor, Rachel, instead. She was then escorted to a register by the supervisor's podium where Rachel was able to rectify her issue. All the while, the lady was ranting and raving about how awful I am and it's all my fault. I caught up with Rachel at the time clock a few moments later. That lady was a bee, she said, and I agreed, and that was the end of it. Sorry you paid with the wrong card, lady, but blaming me for it is like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and claiming your order was wrong. You're the one who effed up. This is a great example of how working in retail can be both very tiring and very fun in the worst way. Because you work such a long shift and were patient and professional, you should get an award. Some people really don't understand how payments work. 2 orders mean 2 different payments. But she acted like you were breaking into her bank account. Karen always does this thing where she can't take credit for mistakes even when she knows she did it. Yeah, you kept your cool even when she pulled her mask down during her temper tantrum, which she did. People who work in stores are real unsung stars. The whiskey you drank after that shift should have tasted extra sweet, right? And our last story. Patience, property, and petty payback. A 4-year waiting game. In 2017, my wife and I bought a home on a serene 4-acre forested lot. It was the kind of place we'd always dreamed of, peaceful, surrounded by trees, and just secluded enough. The original owner, during one of our chats, offhandedly mentioned something about how the neighbor to the north had their driveway a little close to the property line. I didn't think that much of it at the time. That changed later that fall. Our northern neighbor's house was built slab on grade, and apparently the builder hadn't accounted for proper drainage. Every time it rained, water pooled into their ground floor. A frustrating problem, no doubt, but not one that had anything to do with us. That didn't stop them from making it our problem. One day, I noticed an excavator parked near their driveway. By the time I investigated, they had dug a massive ditch along what they assumed was their side of the property line, dumping all the rocks and soil onto our land. Worse, they'd cut down several mature black maple trees in the process. I stood there staring at the destruction, equal parts furious and baffled. These weren't saplings, they were part of a beautiful sugar bush we'd planted to preserve. It was clear this wasn't going to resolve itself, so I called in a surveyor. The surveyors I hired were from the same firm that had mapped out the development a decade earlier. They quickly confirmed what I suspected. The neighbor's driveway wasn't just a little close to the property line, it extended over 100 feet onto our land, in some spots as far as 12 feet. With the results in hand, I drafted a polite letter including a copy of the survey and sent it via registered mail to the neighbors. Surely, once they saw the evidence, they'd take responsibility and make things right. They received the letter but didn't respond. Undeterred, I sent a second letter a month later. This one wasn't even picked up. It was returned to me unopened. It was obvious they thought ignoring the problem would make it disappear. At this point, I knew better than to try to reason with them directly. I'd heard through the grapevine that the neighbor, a local business owner, fancied himself untouchable. Small-town big shot, always making his own rules. Time for professionals. I contacted a real estate lawyer and had them draft a formal notice. This time, there was no avoiding it. The neighbor's lawyer replied, admitting fault and promising to rectify the situation, and then nothing. For 3 years, they did absolutely nothing. The driveway remained where it was, the rocks and dirt sat piled on our land, and the destroyed trees were a constant reminder of their arrogance. Friends and family gave me all kinds of advice. Just fix it yourself and sue them for the costs. Demand compensation for the trees they destroyed. I considered it all, but I decided to wait. They'd admitted fault through their lawyer. It wasn't like they could backtrack. Patience, I figured, would pay off. Over time, I heard rumblings that the neighbor's wife wasn't thrilled with forest living. The water problem had never been resolved, and the novelty of the house had worn off. Then, 4 years later, the moment I'd been waiting for, a for sale sign appeared in front of their house. I called the listing agent the same day. Hi, this is OP. I see you're representing the property at address. Just so you're aware, your client's been trespassing on my land for years. Their driveway and several piles of dirt and rock are all on my property. The realtor was stunned. Oh, I'll have to discuss this with them. Unsurprisingly, the neighbors couldn't sell the house without addressing the issue. Suddenly, they were very motivated to fix the mess they'd ignored for years. For the next 3 weeks, dump trucks made endless trips hauling away topsoil, rocks, and debris. Their gravel driveway was torn up and moved back to their side of the property line, and the scarred land was regraded and seeded to eventually grow back into forest. Every few days, someone from their side would timidly approach me. Is this good now? They'd ask. What a story. It's incredible how your calm, calculated approach turned what could have been a massive ongoing feud into a well-deserved victory. I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been to stare at that trespass for years while they acted untouchable, but you played the long game brilliantly. The cherry on top was seeing their motivation skyrocket when selling the property became impossible without fixing their mess. Plus, it's satisfying knowing your beautiful lot can finally heal without their arrogance overshadowing it. Bravo for keeping your cool and outlasting their stubbornness. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.